John Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The film set fell silent. Not the ordinary quiet between takes, but the kind of silence that happens when everyone knows something important is about to occur. The kind that makes experienced crew members stop what they're doing and turn toward the source. It was 1967. A Western production shooting on the Warner Brothers lot. Big budget. Big names. Big egos. John Wayne was there as both star and unofficial moral center of the production. A role he'd played on dozens of sets over 3 decades. At the craft services table near the edge of the set, a studio executive named Richard Kellerman was holding court. Mid-50s, expensive suit that didn't belong on a dusty Western set, slicked back hair, the kind of studio man who measured his worth in power lunches and contract negotiations rather than actual filmmaking. He was talking loudly. The way certain men do when they want everyone to hear them. "Kid doesn't have it," Kellerman said, gesturing with his coffee cup toward a young actor sitting alone by the saloon facade. 17 years old and can't hit a mark to save his life. I told the director we should have gone with someone else. Someone with experience. The young actor's name was Michael Garrett. First major film role. Scared out of his mind. Trying desperately not to show it. Michael had heard every word. His shoulders hunched slightly. He stared at the script pages in his lap, pretending to study them, his face burning with humiliation. The crew members near Kellerman shifted uncomfortably. No one laughed. No one agreed. But no one contradicted him either. He was a studio executive. He had power. You didn't challenge men like that if you wanted to keep working. Kellerman continued, warming to his subject. I mean, look at him. Deer in the headlights. Can't deliver a line without stammering. Should have stayed in whatever dinner theater he crawled out of. That's when John Wayne set down his coffee cup. The sound of porcelain touching wood was soft, but in that moment it carried. Wayne had been sitting at a table 20 feet away, reviewing his own script, wearing his costume, tan shirt, leather vest, that weathered face that had defined American cinema for generations. He stood up slowly. No hurry. No drama. Just a man deciding it was time to stand. Every person on that set turned to look at him. Wayne walked toward Kellerman with that distinctive gait, not a swagger, just the walk of a man who knew exactly who he was and had nothing to prove. His boots made steady sounds against the plywood floor of the set. Step. 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 Kellerman, sensing the approach, turned. His confident smile faltered slightly when he saw who was coming. Wayne stopped 3 feet from him. Close enough to make it personal. Far enough to show control. He didn't cross his arms. Didn't point. Didn't lean in. Just stood there, looking at Kellerman with those steady blue eyes that had stared down every kind of villain Hollywood could create. The silence stretched. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Finally, Wayne spoke. His voice was quiet. Conversational. The kind of tone you'd use to discuss the weather. You finished? 2 words. That's all. Kellerman blinked. I'm sorry, what? With the show you're putting on, Wayne said, still in that same calm tone. Making sure everyone knows how smart you are. How important. You finished? Kellerman's face flushed. Now listen, Duke, I was just... That boy over there, Wayne interrupted, not raising his voice at all, is 17 years old. First big picture. Scared half to death. Trying his best. Well, his best isn't. I wasn't finished talking. The set went even quieter, if that was possible. Someone had turned off the generator. The usual hum of set activity, crew members moving equipment, low conversations, the distant sound of other productions, all of it faded away. Wayne continued, his tone still conversational, still quiet. You want to criticize his performance, you do it privately with the director. You want to suggest changes, you talk to the people who can actually make them. What you don't do is stand here like a big man in your expensive suit and tear down a kid who's trying to learn his craft. Kellerman's jaw tightened. I have every right to. You have the right to be quiet now, Wayne said. Not a threat. Not anger. Just a simple statement of fact. See, here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk off this set. You're going to go back to your office. And you're going to remember that making pictures is about more than contracts and budgets. It's about people. And when you forget that, you stop being useful. You can't tell me. Wayne took one step closer. Still no aggression in his posture. Still perfectly calm. But something in that single step made Kellerman stop mid-sentence. I just did, Wayne said quietly. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The standoff lasted perhaps 3 seconds. But everyone who was there would remember it as much longer. Time stretched in that space between the two men. The studio executive in his suit, the actor in his Western costume, the question of who actually had power hanging in the air like smoke. Kellerman broke first. His eyes dropped. His shoulders shifted. The confident stance melted into something smaller. I was just... He started, but the words had nowhere to go. Wayne waited. Patient. Immovable. I'll be in my office, Kellerman finally muttered. He turned, walked toward the edge of the set, and disappeared through the soundstage door. His expensive shoes clicked against concrete, each step a small retreat. Wayne stood there for a moment longer, letting the dust settle. Then he turned and walked to where Michael Garrett sat, still hunched over his script, looking like he wanted the ground to swallow him. Wayne sat down in the chair next to him. Said nothing at first. Just sat there, two men in Western costumes on a film set in Burbank, California, pretending to be somewhere else, someone else. First big picture's the hardest, Wayne said eventually, his voice gentle now, almost grandfatherly. Everything feels too big. Too bright. Too many people watching. Michael nodded, not trusting his voice. I was terrible in my first pictures, Wayne continued. Couldn't find my mark. Couldn't remember my lines. Moved like I had wooden legs. Took me years to figure it out. Really? Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. Really? You know what made the difference? Michael shook his head. Someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. And then I started doing the same for other people. That's how it works. You take what you're given and you pass it on. Wayne stood up, placed one weathered hand on Michael's shoulder. You're doing fine. Trust yourself. Trust the director. And don't listen to men in expensive suits who wouldn't know a good performance if it walked up and introduced itself. He walked back toward his own position on set, picked up his coffee cup, and resumed reading his script like nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. To understand why that moment mattered so much, you need to understand who John Wayne really was off-screen. Not the myth. Not the legend. The man. John Wayne was born Marion Morrison in 1907, small-town Iowa, son of a pharmacist. He'd worked his way through the film industry from the bottom. Prop boy, extra, stunt player, bit parts. He knew what it was like to be the youngest person on set, the least experienced, the one everyone dismissed. He'd also lived with a secret shame that colored everything he did for the rest of his life. During World War II, when millions of American men enlisted, John Wayne stayed in Hollywood making movies. Not because he was a coward. Not because he didn't want to serve. But because the studio convinced him he was more valuable as a symbol, making war pictures that kept morale high, selling war bonds, being the face of American strength on screen. His marriage was falling apart. He had children to support. The studio applied pressure. And Wayne, at 34, made the decision to stay. By the time he tried to enlist in 1944, he was 37 and the military turned him down. The war ended. The men came home. And John Wayne spent the rest of his life carrying the weight of that choice. Every war film he made, and he made dozens, was in some way an apology. Every time he played a soldier, a veteran, a man who did his duty, he was trying to be the man he wished he'd been. The man he thought he should have been. But that guilt also taught him something crucial: the difference between the role you play and the person you are. The difference between seeming strong and being strong. Real strength, Wayne learned, wasn't about being the toughest guy in the room. It was about using whatever power you had to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. It was about showing up. About doing the right thing even when it cost you something. On film sets, that meant something specific. Wayne became known, though he never talked about it publicly, as the actor who protected the young ones. The inexperienced. The scared. The ones the studios chewed up and spit out without a second thought. If a director was cruel to a young actor, Wayne would have a quiet word. If a producer tried to take advantage, Wayne would make a call. If someone needed defending, Wayne was there. Not loudly. Not publicly. Just there. Because he remembered being young and scared and not knowing if he'd ever make it. And because he was trying to be the kind of man who deserved the uniform he wore on screen, even if he'd never worn it in real life. That afternoon in 1967, when Richard Kellerman humiliated a 17-year-old kid for sport, Wayne saw himself. Saw all the young people he'd been. Saw all the ways the industry crushed people for no good reason. And he did what he always did when faced with that choice: he stood up. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. After the confrontation, filming continued. Michael Garrett delivered his scenes. He wasn't perfect, first-time actors rarely are, but he was better than he'd been before. More confident. More grounded. At the end of the shooting day, as the crew was wrapping equipment and actors were heading to their trailers, Wayne called Michael over. "Got a minute?" They walked to Wayne's trailer. Not the biggest one on the lot, Wayne never cared about that, but comfortable. Lived in. Photos on the walls. Scripts stacked on surfaces. The smell of coffee and leather. Wayne poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. Handed one to Michael. They sat in the small trailer, the sounds of the set winding down outside, and Wayne said something that Michael Garrett would remember for the next 43 years of his life. "What happened today," Wayne said, "wasn't about you." Michael looked confused. "Sir? That executive. Kellerman. He wasn't really talking about your performance. He was showing off. Making himself feel big by making you feel small. Men like that, they're everywhere. In this business especially. I know, but—" "Let me finish," Wayne said gently. "Here's what matters. You can't control what other people say about you. You can't control who tries to tear you down. But you can control what you do next. You can let it crush you, or you can use it. Learn from it. Get better." He paused, took a sip of coffee. "I messed up a lot when I was young. Still mess up now. The difference is I stopped letting other people's opinions matter more than my own work. You do the work. You show up. You try to be better today than you were yesterday. That's all you can control." Michael nodded slowly. "And one more thing," Wayne added. "When you make it, and if you work hard enough, you will remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to be the youngest person in the room. The least experienced. The one everyone's watching, waiting for you to fail. And when you see someone else in that position, you do what I did today. You stand up for them. You pass it on." He stood, indicating the conversation was over. At the trailer door, Wayne reached into his vest pocket and pulled out something small, a business card, blank except for a phone number written in pencil. "You ever need anything," Wayne said, handing it to Michael. "Someone's giving you trouble. Someone's trying to push you around. You call that number." Michael took the card with trembling hands. "Thank you, Mr. Wayne. Call me Duke," Wayne said, and closed the door. Michael Garrett went on to have a decent career. Not a superstar, but solid work for 30 years. He directed later. produced. Taught acting at a small college. And in his office, framed on the wall next to his first movie poster, was a blank business card with a phone number written in pencil. He never called it. Never needed to. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. But he told every young actor who came through his classes the same thing John Wayne had told him. When you see someone being torn down, you stand up. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just firmly. Quietly. Without compromise. Richard Kellerman left the film industry 3 years later. No scandal. No dramatic firing. He just faded away, as men who mistake cruelty for power eventually do. The film finished shooting. It was a modest success. Michael's performance was praised by critics as surprisingly assured for a newcomer. John Wayne made 70 more films before he died in 1979. But that afternoon in 1967, the moment he stood up, walked over, and ended a man's cruelty with 8 quiet words, became part of Hollywood legend. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real.